everyone, it's me, Lois, with OzzyLosi Knit Designs, and this is my first Meet the Maker or Ask Me Anything. I've never done that before, but I've had an increase in likes and follows and whatever on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. So I'm very thankful, but I also thought that I could just do a Meet the Maker or Ask Me Anything. And that way, if you guys have any questions for me, then I could answer them. So I have received some questions through email and DM or whatever. And so I really appreciate that. I know that 8:30 a.m. on a Monday morning is a little hard to swing if you have a job. I do, but mine starts a little bit later, which means I have time for knit bits, and I have time to do this before I go to my regular work. So if no one comes on and asks questions, that's okay. But I do have some questions that were asked, and so I wrote them down, and I will just go through those, and we'll see what we can find out about me. Something new, maybe. I wanted to start with an easy one. Let's see. Okay, this one's easy. What are you currently knitting? That's a great question, and I don't have a great answer for that because, I guess it's a good answer. I just can't show it to you. I'm actually working on a commission knit, and so I'm knitting just that all the time until I get that finished. And I'm not allowed to share any details about it or anything like that, but that's kind of fun. It's the first commission knit that I've ever done. So yeah, so that's been interesting. I've had people ask me to commission knit and then they always act out, that's fine. Like, it's really expensive. I think that people think that if they ask you to knit something for them, that it's going to cost less than it would if you bought it in the store. But the yarn sometimes can cost more than the item in the store, and that doesn't include your time. And since this is actually not my first business, I learned in my first business a long time ago that you ask for what you're worth. And if people can't afford it, that's okay. But you don't want to be giving away your time or your resources for free because the people who will take advantage of that will take advantage of that. And I'm not saying anyone would do that. I was always told that seemed like a very fair price, but it was just outside their range. I get it. I wouldn't spend that on that either, probably. I would just knit it myself. But anyway, that was a long answer. Sorry. I better speed it up. Oh, hi, Holly. I saw I'm so excited. What got me interested in knitting in the first place? Oh, that's a great question. So I always crocheted because my sister's a crocheter. My grandma was a crocheter, but my grandma didn't teach me. My sister did. My oldest sister, Sherry. And she would always tell me that knitting was really a lot harder than crocheting, and I could not crochet very well. So I was interested in knitting for a very, very long time, but afraid of it. And then I had a friend who did both crochet and knitting, and she was like, knitting is way easier. And so I started thinking, well, maybe it just depends on the person, like geometry, algebra, right? And so I was like, maybe I should try it, but I didn't. And so then finally, my husband does not like crochet items. He only wants knit items. And I got in a car accident that had me kind of laid up for a little while, and I cannot sit still. So my husband got me a Learn to Knit kit for while I was recovering, and that was the best time to get that, and it was the best. It was the best gift because it just found knitting to be so much easier than crocheting. Once I got started, I struggled so much as a beginner, but I was stuck on the couch and I had to do something, so I taught myself to knit that way. I think that answers that question. But yeah, that was how that all came about. And I became addicted from that moment, from when I learned to knit until even now. Have not yet knit today, but I was knitting all the way until bedtime last night. I really like this question. Someone sent me, what is the best knitting tip that someone told me? So I was doing a knit along, I think, with Marley Bird. No, it was definitely Marley Bird. It was a sweater. And up to this point, I had just been like adding yarn in whenever I needed to and not really thinking about where's a good place to add yarn in. And she said, and this like, probably is like the lowest, but she said that you should wait and always add new yarn in at the end of your row. That was a game changer for me because before that, I would just add it in whenever it seemed like I needed to without much thought or planning, and then weaving in the ends in the middle of your shirt or something that's, it doesn't ever go as well as you would like it to. But on the ends, it makes weaving in everything so easy, especially if your sweater's seamed, because you can just hide them all in the seams. Genius. So that is my favorite knitting tip. And now I never join yarn in the middle unless it's like in Tarja or something or Fair Isle. Otherwise, it's always on the ends. I bring it in. Let's see. My favorite knitting technique. Oh, that's really hard. I think I prefer color work to cables. I do like cables, but I think that most often I go for color work over cables. And I like all kinds of color work. I love mosaic. I like Fair Isle. I like Intarsia. I like all the different color works. So yeah, I'll say color work as like a very generic answer. Have I knit brioche patterns before? Ugh. So the answer to that is no, but I have knit brioche because I sometimes like to just learn new things. So I wanted to learn how to brioche, and so I just was knitting like a little swatch of brioche to see what it was all about and if I could do it. And so, yeah, I've knit brioche, but I haven't knit a pattern. I would like to at some point. We'll see. Yeah, I would like to at some point. If you have a good brioche knitting pattern for maybe like me, a newer brioche knitter, like all I've done is a swatch, I would love to know what that is because, yeah, I would definitely like some, I don't know, tips. What was the first thing that I knit? Well, I always talk about knitting dishcloths and washcloths. So it may be like surprising, but actually that's not what I knit first. It isn't. I should have, but what I actually ended up doing was knitting small swatches of fabric and throwing them away. I should have kept them and used them as dishcloths or wash rags, but I didn't. I just threw them all away. So the first thing I think that I knit beyond just like a swatch was I tried to make a baby blanket for one of my daughter's friends' mothers was having a baby, and it was terrible. Like I felt so bad about it. I didn't even give it to her. I think I have it stuffed away in a cupboard somewhere. It was just a basic brick knit stitch pattern. So I don't know what the deal was at that point. It was still pretty new, but I could not get it right. Anyway, so sad. Let's see. Oh, okay. So this is kind of the same along what Holly asked, because Holly said, what got me interested in knitting in the first place? And this one's like, why did you, well, I guess it's different. Why did you decide to teach and design knit items? So this is actually the same. It all happened at the same time. It was COVID 2020 winter, and our church was starting to bring people back together in very, very small groups and following all the rules and regulations, masks, and no more than 6 gathered, which I think was the current guidelines from the state, or not the guidelines, but the rule or law, whatever they made it for that time with COVID. And so we started having 6-week groups, and they wanted people who had a hobby to teach that to other people so that that they could have more than just like the meeting with people, but something to bond over. And it didn't have to be like all Bible study, but like, we're more than just Bible people. We like things. And so the people who were leading it asked if I would do a knitting class. And so I said yes. And then I made 6 patterns to teach people how to knit really quickly. And I didn't know anything about knit pattern design. I didn't know anything about teaching people to knit. I was just going to go for it. I created this whole curriculum with 6 patterns that didn't get tech edited or test knit, and they're sitting somewhere on my hard drive. But I made the whole program. And then what ended up happening was that all the people who were like, we want to learn to knit. No one signed up. I had one lady sign up, and she already knows how to knit. But we had the best time ever, and we knit baby blankets for a local charity. And we still visit when we see each other because she's amazing. Anyway, so that was my first designs and my first time getting ready to teach someone to knit. So after that, then I started teaching people to knit. Because I had that stuff, and I actually didn't end up using it. I ended up teaching people how to knit with dishcloths and washcloths. My first thing, which I'm thinking now I should like revisit. It started out with like, I think a headband, maybe a dishcloth. I'll have to look. Anyway, it was 6 different items over the course of the weeks, and the last thing that we knit was a hat. So it was pretty fun. Anyway, so after that, in January, when I was knitting baby blankets with the other lady, I designed the color and texture play baby blanket, and that was my first official pattern, which I had tech edited and test knit, and it's out on Ravelry, and you can scoop that up. And that was my very first actual pattern. But it all kind of happened at the same time. So then I focused on just knit pattern design for about a year, and then came back around to teaching people to knit. So interesting how that all works out. Okay, my favorite pattern that I wrote. Oh, I really like my color and texture play baby blanket. It's that design was really special to me, important to me at that time in my life. I wasn't knit for a particular baby in mind, but it was knit and designed with a mother's heart, thinking about how important it is for us to nurture our children, and to nurture their brains from the very beginning. And so I like that pattern. I used a lot of thought and a lot of heart into that pattern because it was all about color and how it affects us as people. Color for infants and how they can see that and how it helps develop their brains, as well as different textures. And so the blanket itself has 3 different textures, no matter which border you end up making, because it does have an optional border. You could do a garter stitch border or you could do a linen stitch border. So no matter which way you go, there are different textures throughout that blanket. And that is because what I didn't know before I started designing this, but I started looking into it, was that babies develop so much of their brain and their knowledge about language through their senses of touch and sight. And so exposing them to like a blanket with different colors, and especially when they're very little, right? That are very drastic changes in color. Like black and white is good for a baby. So if you knit it in black and white, I think it would look really cool first. But second, it's great for their brains. And then texture also, and it helps teach them about about language and about, the world around them. So yeah, so I guess I would think that's my favorite one. I really like the set that I just came out with, though. The Snow Celebration set. That one I think is my prettiest design. And I did a lot of first. I really like that one. But I still think Color and Texture Play is my favorite. What was my favorite thing to knit? What is your favorite thing to knit? I think I should say what is. I like to knit a lot of things. I always think I want to knit blankets, but I hate doing that because it takes forever. I love knitting sweaters. I get kind of anxious about it sometimes because I don't know, I just do. And hats. I love to knit hats because everyone loves the hats. I think they just grab them all the time, and that makes me feel so happy. Like whenever I finish a new hat, everybody in the house takes a turn wearing it. And if we have somebody over, it might leave the house with them actually. And so it just feels good to knit something like that. And then, yeah, I think I'll say hats. I love knitting hats. Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. I think I just have this one more. Mindless knit or intense concentration. Both. I love mindless knits because if I'm knitting, I will actually sit and watch a whole episode or movie. If I'm not knitting, I find that very hard to do. And I do like to concentrate on my knitting and grow my skills and get really involved in a pattern too. So I like to do that too. And I love music. So it's a great time to listen to music. I don't like to listen to TV or to like a podcast or anything while I do an intense knit, because I find that my focus is on, what I'm knitting. And so I can listen to music. I can listen to music that I'm familiar with, but anything new that enters, it just becomes overstimulating for me. So yeah. So I love mindless knits because that's when I can watch Home Alone for the 100th time with my son because it's his favorite movie, and then I love the concentrating ones, but it's harder to carve out time for those. Anyway, that is all the questions that I have seen. And I thank you all so much for joining me live if you did, or sending me your questions beforehand. That was very kind of you all. And so I will be signing off. I will also be editing this video so there won't be so many pauses, and get that up on YouTube. There is no knit bits today because I was doing this. I'll be back tomorrow with knit bits, and we'll be doing gauge, troubleshooting gauge video number 2, and so that should be fun. If you have other questions, or if you thought of a question during this time, please feel free to go ahead and send it to me, and I'll email you back or DM you, whatever. All right, take care. Bye-bye.